Custom controllers are becoming increasingly popular. Places like the Controller Shop, Scuff Gaming, and Chaos Controllers have really come in and set the market for custom controllers. So today I figured I'd show you guys how to make buttons so you guys can customize your own controller yourself. I've chosen to do the Sega Saturn, but you can do whatever controller you want. First step, let's go ahead and rip that controller apart and get to those buttons. Okay, now that the controller's ripped apart and we've got those buttons, the first order of business is to find a container that we can go ahead and put these buttons into. I'm using actually a golf ball trophy display case. It's made out of acrylic. It actually worked really well. You can see I'm applying hot glue to the bottom of the buttons and I'm placing them in there so we can get a nice tight seal. The goal for the next step, creating the mold, we want to make sure we've got as tight a seal as possible. Okay, now that the mold's all sealed up, it's time to go ahead and start mixing the silicone. Now, all silicone is different, so you're going to want to make sure that you take a look and know exactly what your mix ratio is supposed to be. This specific one I'm using is a 1-to-1 mix, and I will leave a link in the description to this on Amazon, so you can purchase the exact one if that's what you want. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and use a scale here to make sure I get it perfect, and make sure that my parts are exactly 1-to-1. Before I start mixing, you're going to see me add a little bit of dye to it, and the reason why I'm doing that is basically to make sure that I get it mixed completely, and when everything is uniform and the same color, I'll know that I've got it all together properly and I'm in good shape. Okay, I'm going to pull you guys in a little bit closer. I've mixed up a batch of orange silicone this time. And pouring it's extremely simple. You just got to take your time and pour it in the same spot and the silicone will spread out for you. You don't need to try to force it into different places or anything like that. Just let it pour from one place and it'll spread to everywhere else it needs to go. Okay, now that orange mold's all done, let's get back to this purple one and go ahead and top this thing off. Once the mold has been poured and the silicone's all in there and you've all wrapped up, the next step is to go ahead and make sure you have no air bubbles or as few air bubbles as humanly possible. You'll see me go ahead and tapping the mold against the table that I'm working on, and that's why you need to make sure you glue the sides because you don't want this stuff to leak out. But it's important to do that because air bubbles will get in the way of your buttons and effectively ruin it. After about 40 minutes, the silicone should be cured, and that means it's time to start demolding and seeing how we did. You can see I've kind of cut the glue away from the sides, and now I'm trying to pry away the top half of the acrylic case from the bottom half of the acrylic case. Once I've done that, I'll slowly wiggle out the mold and then eventually move around the mold to free the buttons. The beauty of using silicone is nothing sticks to it but other silicone, so all of your original parts, that meaning your buttons, should be still in really good shape and come out extremely clean. as you can see, that mold turned out absolutely fantastic. The detail is all there. We've got all the letters on the buttons and everything, so it turned out really good. So now let's go ahead and mix up some resin. I'm going to be using clear resin to go ahead and cast my buttons. One disclaimer I'm just going to go ahead and throw out there. You've got to be careful when using resin. It needs to be mixed absolutely pretty much perfectly for it to work the way it's supposed to, or it will take an extremely long time for it to cure properly. The other thing to throw out there is I am not going to use a pressure pot to go ahead and cure the resin. Typically, if you want it to actually come out crystal clear with no air bubbles, you're going to need a pressure pot to go ahead and put it into. I'm not planning to use one because most of you out there won't have one either, so you might as well see what the results look like when you don't use a pressure pot. This goes without saying, but you're going to want to mix that resin really, really well. I've also added some pigmentation to the resin itself via special paint, and you will see what makes that paint very special when we get to the end of the video. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and use the respective colors for the A, B, and C button, and the X, Y, and Z buttons we are going to go ahead and do in white. So let's go ahead and get the resin poured and see how it looks. Okay, so when I was showing you the comparison of those two buttons, you might have saw me feeling the bottom of the button. The purpose in doing that is just to kind of see how they feel. You'll notice, like for the Saturn and like the Nintendo Switch and a few other consoles, the buttons are actually like indented a little bit. So what I've got here is my handy dandy Dremel with a 1/32 inch engraving bit, and I'm just going to go ahead and take a little bit out of the bottom so it can go ahead and sit on the pad properly and the button will push as it's supposed to. This is something I'm doing a little bit by feel, but I suppose you could do it with a pair of calipers if you have them. Once that's done, just give it a head test and make sure it works the way it's supposed to. But that's pretty much the process, guys. You can do this for pretty much any console and have some fun. You can see I went a little bit crazy and just made a whole ton of them. Well, here's a nice assortment of the buttons I made, and I think you guys remember earlier I said I did something a little bit special. The dye or paint that I was using, it's actually UV reactive paint, so we'll be able to have some fun with that a little bit later on. But here's what it looks like under a black light, so pretty cool and something different. You certainly don't see this in any kind of commercial product. And with that, let's get some of those clear buttons together and let's rebuild the Saturn controller. Well, the controller feels absolutely fantastic. The fact that we used an actual mold instead of just using third-party placement buttons means that you have the authentic feel of true Saturn buttons. There's no flat spots, no excess doming, nothing like that. It feels just the way it's supposed to, like the original controller. With that said, I want to thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you like this kind of content, please subscribe to my channel for more. Have a good one.